So this Texas billionaire is driving through the Texas countryside, and he gets deathly sick in a small Texan town. He says to the small town doctor, "If you save my life, I will give you anything you desire, and I have the means to make that happen." And so then he goes under, and 3 days later he comes back, and the little town doctor has saved this man's life. And the billionaire looks back up and says, "Doc, I wasn't kidding about what I said. Whatever you ask, I will give you." And so the doctor very humbly said, "Well, I've always wished I could have a matching set of golf clubs." And so the billionaire says, "Well, consider it done." Well, 6 months go by and he never hears from the billionaire, and he forgets all about it because that wasn't his motivation in the first place. But after 6 months, he gets a phone call from the billionaire, and the billionaire says, "I haven't forgotten about you. And sorry it's taken so long, but it's been so hard to find a matching set of golf clubs. But finally, I found an 18-hole course in Dallas and a 27-hole course in Houston. So we had to expand the course in Dallas to 27 holes, and it's taken 6 months. And the deed is in your name, and you are the proud owner of a matching set of golf clubs." Now, there's a point to that story. And the point is this, that sometimes what we do is we let our small thinking get in the way of the big offer and the big God in which we have. And of course, my message tonight, and this is the third incarnation of this for some of our people, and I don't care because they haven't got it the first 2 times, is that we are called to think big in small places. And one of the things that I'm going to share with you is that, and you might not believe this, but by the time I'm done, I'm convinced you will be, that our greatest limitation is not the size of the place in which we minister, but the thinking in which we embrace that place. And you see, when we think about it really, we all minister in small places. Nobody ministers in a big place, really, if you really think about it. It doesn't matter, whatever church you are in, no matter how big the church is, small or large, you're probably ministering in a small place. It might be a youth room or a children's classroom or a prayer room, or it might be the nursery, or it might be standing at the door greeting someone, and the space in which you minister is 4 by 4, and you never move from that spot as you're handing out bulletins or whatever it is. And when you think about it, it doesn't matter who you are, we all minister in a small place. My small place is from there to there. And I walk back and forth on this stair, and sometimes I go up one and down one, but it's still pretty small place. And the opportunities that you have to minister in a big place are actually few and far between. They will come once in a while, and when they come, you know what you need to do? You need to smell a bouquet and let it go, because I got news for you, you don't live there. Let me tell you a little story. It happened to me just 2.5 years ago. We were doing a big event in Winnipeg, and it was called One Heart. And One Heart in 2013 was over 100 churches all gathering together. We had built a brand new football stadium for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers called Investors Group Field. They wanted somebody to try out the facility before they had an actual game there, and they asked if the churches wanted to meet in the stadium. For the inauguration of this thing, we said, bring it on. They gave us this stadium, and then we had to scratch our heads, not knowing how many people would show up. We had to scratch our heads and come up with a speaker, and my colleagues, my peers in this city, invited me to bring the word that day. So that day in the spring of 2013, I preached to 16,000 people. In this brand new stadium and you see that they gave me a Bombers jersey as well with my name on it. It doesn't get any better than that, right? And I know what you're thinking. You want to try to be humble in that moment. There's no possible way. You're just eating it up. You know what I'm doing. You see my hands up like that? I'm no, quit clapping. Let me start preaching. I'll get going here. That's what I'm saying. At least that's how I remember it. And it was a moment, and the whole time you're having to remind yourself, this isn't real. This is not where I live. This is not what God's called me to do. And here's the thing. So I had that opportunity of preaching to 16,000 people that day on Sunday. You know where I was on Monday night? On Monday night, I was in, some of you have been to that room, A3, down the hall, the Labyrinth Hall, speaking to 16 brand new people in our church, taking them through this journey. Now, here's my question for you. Where do you think, ultimately, in the greater scheme of things, I'm going to have more influence, with the 16,000 people or the 16 on Monday night the next night? I can tell you for a fact it's the 16. Because you know what? I couldn't even see the 16,000 people. For all I knew, they were cardboard cutouts. I don't know who they were. And those 16 people in the room here the next night, those were the people I was actually ministering to. Those are the people I know their names. Those are the people I have influence in their life. Those are the people that I actually have a chance of making a difference in their life. The 16 people are actually more significant than the 16,000. All you have to do is look at Jesus' life. He changed the world with the multitudes. Right or wrong? How many people? 12. Well, he was down to 11 by the time they were done, right? He changed the world with 11 men. He taught the disciples, but he preached to the multitudes. And at the end of his ministry, where was the multitude? Anybody remember? They were shouting something. What was that again? Crucify him, crucify him. That's where the multitude was. There was no influence in that. And so, though you might long for the big moment and the big place, and you know what, some of you might get it in varying relative degrees. We all get that moment. But just remember, that's not real life. And that's not where you're going to change the world. You're going to change the world in a small place. And let me just remind you something else. This is a little side story here on this event. That, anytime that you get elevated, there's a scripture about this. You have to be so careful because the Lord will bring you down in a moment if he needs to. Let me tell you how it played out that particular day. So I shared the stage that day at the football stadium where the Bombers try to play. And I shared the stage with Milt Stegall. Now, for those that are American and from elsewhere, they don't know who Milt Stegall is. Milt Stegall is a sports icon in our city. He played for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. He held many records for the CFL. He was the MVP 2 years running. He's in the Sports Hall of Fame. We have a street named after Milt Stegall. There is a Milt Stegall Drive. How many of you have a street named after you? Milt has his own street. He doesn't even live here. He lives in Atlanta, for goodness sakes. And we brought him up for Atlanta to speak, and he and I were going to share the stage that night. That day. This is what happened. Just before we were about to speak, the two of us were standing on the side of the field, just chilling. There we are. And he's got the mic in his hand because he's going up first, and I'm going up second. And while we were standing there, a reporter came up to us. And the reporter came up to me and said, "Oh, I'm so glad I found you. Do you have time for an interview?" And I said, "Sure." And then she said to me, "I'm so sorry that I'm new to Winnipeg and I actually didn't know who you were. I needed to ask." I said, "Well, there's people that don't know who I am." There's the odd person that doesn't know who I am. And so this is what I'm saying to her. And so she says, "Do you have a minute for me to interview?" And I said, I certainly do. So she says, "Ready, 3, 2, 1. She says, "I'm standing here at the brand new Investors Group field. We're at the 3rd annual One Heart celebration. And I've got with me former Winnipeg Blue Bomber and CFL Hall of Famer, Milt Stegall." And she sticks the microphone in my face. And I said, "You think I'm Milt Stegall?" She said, "Aren't you?" I said, "Do I look black?" He's standing right beside me. I said, so somebody pointed him out, but she thought it was me because I got the jersey on. He's got the sports jacket on. I've got the jersey. She thinks I'm Milt Stegall. I said, "You think I'm Milt Stegall?" She says, "Well, aren't you?" I said, "No." She says, "Well, which Winnipeg Blue Bomber are you?" I said, "I'm not a Blue Bomber at all. I'm just wearing the jersey." She says, "Well, why would I want to interview you?" I said, "What?" You remember, go high, go low. There I was, just about to go up on stage, and the Lord reminded me where I really live. Down there where they don't know who I am. So then I explained what was going on and how that guy was Milt Stegall, and she turns to me and says, "Oh, I'm so embarrassed." She says, "Do you think there's any way we could keep this just our little secret?" And I said, "There's no possible chance of that happening. I will be telling this story within a week." So I'm just trying to remind you that when you have your grand moments, just remember what they really mean. Now let's go into Judges chapter 6. We're going to start in verse 11. And verse 11 says this: Now the angel of the Lord came down and sat under the terebinth tree, which was in Ophrah, which belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, the son, while his son Gideon threshed wheat in their winepress in order to hide from the Midianites. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said to him, "The Lord is with you, you mighty man of valor." And Gideon said to him, "Oh my Lord, if the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles which our fathers told us about, saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord has forsaken us and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites." And the Lord turned to him and said, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall save Israel from the hand of the Midianites. Have I not sent you?" So he said to him, "Oh my Lord, how can I save Israel? Indeed, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house." And the Lord said to him, "Surely I will be with you, and you shall defeat the Midianites as one man." Now let's talk about this story for a minute. You all know it. You've all preached on it. We have Gideon. He's threshing wheat in the bottom of the winepress, which is where you do it, right? No. Why was he doing it in the bottom of the winepress? Because the land had been overrun by Midianites. I always get those two groups mixed up. That's southern Manitoba that's been overrun with Mennonites. You know what? I should be kinder and more respectful of the Mennonites. I mean, after all, most people know that Adam was actually the first Mennonite. Amen. Right? We all know that because who else would stand beside a naked woman and be tempted by an apple? So here's my point. Let's get back to my story. Why are you distracting me like this? And so here we have this story. We have Gideon. He's hiding in the bottom of the winepress. He's obviously not a brave man or a man of valor. And God calls him and tells him to get out of there and to do something. Now, here's my first point I want to make tonight about thinking big in small places. And the first thing is this. There are no small people, only small places. And see, when he comes to Gideon, he says, "Arise in this might of yours, you mighty man of valor." Does he see him as a small person? Is he in a small place? Yes, he's in a small place. He's in a winepress, but God doesn't look at him based on where he is. He looks at him based on who he knows him to be. But what does Gideon do? Gideon tries to make an excuse. He says, "Well, Lord, don't you know who I am?" Like the Lord doesn't know who you are, right? He says, "Don't you know who I am? I'm the least in my father's house, and my clan is the weakest in all Manasseh. I'm a loser, and I come from a long line of losers. You, of all people, should know that, Lord." Right? That's what he's doing. What is he doing? He's playing the inferiority card, right? He's saying, "But Lord, you don't understand. I come from a dysfunctional family." Isn't that what he's talking about? His family, his clan, his father's house. He's saying, he's pulling the dysfunctional family card. Here, I got this little news flash for you. We all come from dysfunctional families, right? Have you checked out your in-laws? Right? We all come from dysfunctional families. Go read the Bible if you want to know something about dysfunctional families. The very first family in all history, dysfunctional. I mean, the two first brothers, Cain and Abel, and one kills the other. Mildly dysfunctional, right? Eve, I don't know about you. I look at that story, I think there's a woman with an eating disorder. Adam, didn't wear the pants in the family. Didn't wear pants at all. That's a messed up family, you know? And so we've got to get past this, you know, "Lord, don't you know who I am? I'm a small person in a small place." So when he starts playing the inferiority card, the "you don't know who I am, I come from a dysfunctional family" card, did the Lord buy it? The Lord didn't even answer him. He didn't even listen to him. He said, "No, you arise in this might of yours, and you, mighty man of valor, will go and defeat the Midianites as one man." See, here's what you need to remember. There are no small people in God's kingdom. The least in the kingdom is greater than John the Baptist, and he was the greatest in the whole Old Testament of any man born of woman. And so when he looks down at you, you need to understand something. But before we move any further, you need to know that God has created each and every one of you for a purpose. Don't look at the place in which God has put you and judge yourself based on where you are. It's all about who you are. God made you, and he doesn't make no junk, as they say, right? Let me remind you something. What is the measurement? How does God judge us? And when it's all said and done, how does God commend us based on what we've done on this earth? Will it be the quantity of the work that we do for the kingdom? All you have to do is go and look no further than the parable of the talents, right? There was 3 men, and he gives them 3 different talents. He gave one, and of course, we know it's money, but I like the fact that the word is talents because it's kind of like how life works. Some people are just more talented than others, right? I mean, this Derek makes me sick. He plays all these instruments, picks up the saxophone, and he plays, and he'll go to the piano, he'll pick up the bass, he'll play, he can sing. He is colorblind. That's God's little joke on him. But some people have a lot of talents, and some have less. And so when you take that picture, this is what happens. So you have the one who had 1. What did he do with it? Nothing. God was excited about that, right? No, he was mad at him, called him wicked and lazy. But then you have the one who had 5 and the one who had 2, and the one who had 2 gained 2 more and had 4, and the one who had 5 gained 5 more and had 10, which is quite a bit bigger than the 2. Would you agree on that? And yet they both got exactly the same commendation. Am I right about that? Well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord. So it didn't have to do at all about the quantity or the size of the place in which one ministers. The only single criterion for the commendation of God is whether or not you were faithful to what he called and asked you to do. I think we're going to be surprised when we get to heaven. You know why? Because doesn't he talk about my house has many mansions, and don't we know there's kind of some sort of reward system that goes on in heaven? And you are going to be so surprised when you get there. And you find these people that were serving soup in a soup kitchen, and these people that were translating a Bible in Bolivia that you never met, and these people that are doing inner city ministry, and those who are up in the north going to native reservations, and these women that are in the prayer room on their knees day after day praying for the kingdom and for their pastors and different people. And when we get to heaven, they're going to have mansions that are going to make Buckingham Palace look like a trailer park. And then there'll be others, and I'm including myself in this. I'm a little worried, frankly, because I think when I get to heaven, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have a shack at the end of the lane. You say, why? Because Jesus said, you got your reward. And everybody goes, oh, you got such a great building. I said, I don't want this building. This building is a curse to me. Do you realize that I get to heaven? St. Peter's going to say, oh, by the way, you got your reward. Remember all those people talking about the great building? I don't want the building. And we're going to get to heaven. The only consolation I have is that Joel Osteen is going to be sleeping in the dumpster in my back lane. That's the only consolation in the whole story. I say what other people are thinking. It's a personality disorder. So the first thing is this: there's no small people, only small places. The second thing is this: there's no small potential, only small perspective. Now here's my question for you. I want you to think about this. After that visitation of the angel, and after the angel gave the plan to Gideon, and he was still in the winepress, in that moment, what had actually changed? What had changed in that moment? Because everything had changed. But on the outside, nothing had changed. He was still in the same small place, right? Agree or disagree? So what had changed? His perspective had changed. Thank you for coming, Val. He had a different mindset. And what had happened was all of a sudden, everything was different. He had a perspective that was different. He hadn't done anything yet, but he now looked at it differently. And see, here's how it works with us. You see, it doesn't matter what place. We're all ministering in small places in one form or another. What matters is, what are we doing in the small place, and how are we thinking, and what is the vision, and what is the perspective we have? If you look into Scripture, every person that changed the world, God called them from a small place. Abraham was told that he would be the father of a multitude. All of the whole household of Israel came out of that man. And where was he when God spoke to him? He was alone on a mountaintop in a very small place. And God said, you will be a father of a multitude. Where was Joseph when he had that dream? He was the 11th brother. He was at the end of the line, the runt of the litter, and yet God gave him a vision when he was in that small place as the runt of the litter. Eventually, it all changed, and he was over his entire family, and you all know the story. Where was David? He was hiding in a cave, and he still believed that he was going to be the king of Israel. Why did he think he was going to be the king of Israel? He's hiding in a cave. Because God told him. And so it didn't matter that the place that he was in was a cave and he was hiding, like so was Gideon in the bottom of the winepress. That didn't bother David because he had the perspective. And you see, everything really great actually comes out of that small place when we begin to increase our perspective. There's no small potential, only small perspective. I want you to think about something for a moment. How many of you have a place in your home like a chair or a couch or a spot that's your spot? You have a spot. How many of you have a chair? Really, only half? Dave put up his hand. Which one of those mauve chairs in your house is yours, Dave?
On the right-hand side of the couch.
Oh, right-hand side of the couch, that mauve one. Yeah, I visited their house. They had just renovated the whole house. I walked into it. Every wall is mauve. Every chair is purple. Looked like the shirt, for goodness sakes. And I looked at Dave and I said, I can see you didn't decorate this house. And of course, then Linda immediately got offended with me. But you provoked me. You painted it mauve. How can you? Eggplant, she says. Is that how you sold Dave on it? You told him it was eggplant? Eggplant is another name for purple. You know that, don't you? Anyway, here's my point about this. Most of you have a good-sized house, or some of you even have a big house. I bet you hang out in a small place. I bet Dave goes to that small place. I'm just going to tell you this real quick story. In my house, I had this chair, and I prepared for years and years, I prepared all my sermons in that chair. And I had many of the ideas that I ever had for the church happened in that chair. And so then I began to think that it was actually the chair that was coming up with the ideas. And I started referring to the chair, you ask my kids, I started referring to the chair as my smart chair. And my kids would mock me about that. Whenever we had a problem in the house, they'd say, well, why don't you go sit in the smart chair? And I thought, well, maybe I will. And so for years, I produced all my sermons in the smart chair. I called it the smart chair. They all called it the smart chair. I said, get out of my smart chair. They said, I got to do my homework. Let me sit in the smart chair. Anyway, one day I came home from work, and the chair was gone. I turned to Kathy. I said, Kathy, where's the smart chair? She said, that ratty old thing. I threw it out. The ratty old thing? I said, no. She says, find a new spot. There's chairs all over the house. Find a new spot. So I wandered around looking for a spot. And, so eventually I found a new spot. But, before I used to sits and thinks. Now I just sits. And my point in all of this is that really it doesn't matter how big your life is and how big your ministry is and how many things you've got going in this world. You know where it all happens? It all happens in some little spot. And God has strategically placed you in a small place for His greater purpose. And what we need to do is get a hold of that and lay hold of the fact that God will use us in an incredibly small spot. Let me talk to you about our rapper we saw tonight. He's sitting over there. Our rapper, that's Pastor Tim. And Pastor Tim is our online pastor. And he actually does our online church, and he has several hundred people that he pastors every week that connect, all online. We joke, we say they're not real people, they're cyber people. He says they're real people. He says they're real people. And these people are all over the world. And he's got people that they look like little dots on a map to me, but he says they're people. And 3 weeks ago, he led 30 of these people all over the world into the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and they received their prayer language. And we were all confused about it. We said, how do you do that online? Shalaka patalapa. So here we have Pastor Tim, and he's a computer nerd, and he's happy to be like this far away from a computer screen. And he's ministering to the whole world from a cubicle that is literally 7 feet by 7 feet. That's his whole, he is touching the world from a space that's 7 feet by 7 feet. And he understands a bunch of Google stuff that I have no idea what he's even talking about. And he's touching the world through technology from this little tiny space. We were so impressed, we gave him an office last week. He doesn't even know what to do with all that space. He moves his desk into the corner. He's got this big, huge office, and he's in this corner behind his little computer. You know all this graphics you've seen here and these animations? They're pretty cool, eh? You know where they come from? They come from a guy named Chris. He's on our staff. He's our visual guy. And he doesn't even have an office. You know what he has? He works from a folding table. Upstairs there, he has a folding table with a bunch of computer screens on it and a computer and a keyboard. And he doesn't even go for lunch to the lunchroom. He eats his lunch there. He's got food all over it, and the keys are all sticky with food. And he's producing all of this stuff from this little tiny space. We thought we're going to improve his workspace too. So I bought him a placemat. If he's going to eat up there, he shouldn't make such a mess. We have this television program here. Some of you know about it. And our television program has been going coast to coast for 19 years. For 19 years, we've been going coast to coast, and people say, well, where do you produce this? Well, let me see your edit suite. Well, I'd take you to our edit suite, but the problem is the guy who's been producing this, Ernie, edits it in his basement. And the basement edit suite that he works in is an unfinished basement with pink insulation in the walls and wires going like this. It looks like a hazard. The place has concrete floor and no carpet. You wouldn't put your dog down there. And for 19 years, he's been producing a television program that is seen by 200,000 people every week from an unfinished basement. That's big thinking in a small place. Everybody thinks, oh, you need fancy big stuff to make it happen. No, you don't. What you need is big ideas in small places. Right? And hey, you know all these things I just told you about? I'd love to take credit for them, but it turns out I'm not a very important part of any of these. And I'll prove it to you. You know, Ian and Val Bird from Calgary, they invited me to come to speak at their church one Sunday. And I was there, and I was just about to go up and preach. And there was this little old lady sitting right over here on this side over here. And she waves me over. And just before I'm about to go up, she says, "Dearie," and waves. She called me Dearie. And she waves me over and says, "Dearie," and she says to me, "How long are you going to be?" I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She says, "How long are you going to be up there talking?" And I said, "I don't know, maybe 35, 40 minutes. She says, "Well, try to move it along because I need to be home by noon to watch you on television." I said, "But I'm right here." She didn't care that I was right there. She wanted to go home and watch me on television. Apparently, I'm not a very important part in this story. And so the first thing, when we look at this story of Gideon, the first thing we see is this, that there are no small people, only small places. Second thing is there's no small potential, only small perspective. And this is where I'm really going with this. The last thing is there's no small partnerships, only small plans. Now, I want you to think about Gideon for a moment. So the last line that I read in our text was this. The Lord says, "Go in this might of yours, and you shall defeat Midian as one man." Is that true? Right. Is that true that did he defeat Midian as one man? Yeah. As one? Was he one man that defeated Gideon? No. He had some help, didn't he? Let me remind you of something. You know the story and how it all plays out, but let me ask you this. How many people at first, before he kind of culled the herd, how many people at first gathered to him to go into this battle? How many? Do you remember? How many? It was 32,000 people. 32,000 gathered to him. Now here's my question for you. Where did this loser, this least of the least, this least of my father's clan and the weakest in all Manasseh, where did he come up with 32,000 people? Why were 32,000 people in Israel willing to follow Gideon? And I'll tell you why. Because he now had changed his perspective and he had a compelling vision to defeat the Midianites. That is what was really going on here. God gave him this vision, and so when he started sharing the vision, he said, "This is what God wants us to do." People follow a compelling vision. And he was still the same guy he was before, right? The day before. He was the same guy that was hiding in the wine press, but all of a sudden he was realizing his potential and realizing his new perspective. And when he began to share it, people going, Gideon, I'm in. Count me in. We got our American friends here. Let me just ask you a quick question. Who's leading this Republican nomination race for presidency at the moment? Who's that guy? What's his name again? Oh, Donald Trump. Now, why on earth is Donald Trump leading this thing? Why? I mean, imagine if he becomes the next president of the United States, it'll be the first time in your history that you had a cartoon character for a president, right? Donald Duck or Donald Trump. No, they're almost the same to me. And the big question, I can make fun of him, can't I? I'm a Canadian. We got Justin Trudeau. So why are people buying into this? I'll tell you why. Whether you agree with what he's saying, he has a compelling vision. Some of you think it's an absurd vision, but he has a compelling vision, and people go, I like what he's saying. We're going to build the most glorious and wonderful wall from one end of the United States to the other to keep the Mexicans out. And this big bombastic, and we're going to make the Mexicans pay for it, this big loud thing, and everybody's, yeah, we need a wall. And the people, there's people who are agreeing with that, buying in and saying, yeah, you might not agree with the vision, but he has a vision. He wants a wall. And people are going, yeah, let's do the wall. The most beautiful, luxurious wall that we've ever seen. I mean, it's a crazy story. And then he has this whole he's all bent out of shape about immigration. I don't even get that. 2 of his 3 wives needed green cards to get into the country, for goodness sakes. What's this all about? If Obama, let me just talk to my American friends for a minute. If Trump really wants to replace Obama as the next president, he needs a slogan, and I've got the exact one for him. Here it is. Orange is the new black. Hey, that's good, isn't it? He's the orangest man that ever was on the planet. He should be playing up his strengths. That's what I think. So, that was a freebie for you. You can take it back and share it with whomever you like. So I want to go back into our story here for a minute because I want to talk about partnerships. He has 32,000 people. And my big question, I don't know if you've thought about this, where did he find 32,000 people? I mean, surely he didn't have 32,000 friends, right? You have to jump forward in the story a little bit, and it all comes clear here. So jump down to verse 34, and this is what it says. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon. Then he blew the trumpet, and the Abiezrites gathered behind him, and he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh, who gathered behind him, and also sent messengers to Asher and Zebulun and Naphtali, and they came to meet them. Now, here's my question for you real quick. First of all, he says the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. Kind of key, right? And he blew the trumpet, and all of a sudden people looked at this young man, and they went, there's something going on with this guy. There's something going on. This guy has a compelling vision, and there's something on him, and the Lord is on him, and he's got a plan. There's no small partnerships, only small plans. And so first of all, he blew the trumpet, and the Abiezrites gathered to him. Who were the Abiezrites? Who were they? We read it earlier, you missed it, right? You weren't paying attention. They're his clan. Remember he said, my clan is the weakest in Manasseh? He was from the Abiezrites. The Abiezrites were his clan. And who was Manasseh? That was his tribe, right? That was his tribe. And so first of all, he gets his clan behind him, and then he gets his tribe behind him, and then there was 3 other tribes that came and joined them, Asher and Zebulun and Naphtali. I don't want you to miss the importance of this. See, Israel was made up, as we know, of 12 tribes. It was a loose confederation of 12 tribes. For the most part, they did their own thing, and they lived in their tribe, and they moved in their tribe, but every once in a while, the confederation of tribes would come together to fight a common enemy. And what happened was when he gathered first of all, he would have gathered his family probably, right? And his family came to him, and then his tribe came, or then his clan came to him, and then his tribe came to him, and then the other tribes came. And I want you to think about his tribe, and you know this story. Not only was he the least in his father's house, and his clan the weakest in Manasseh, Manasseh was the weakest of all the tribes, because half the tribe stayed on the other side of the Jordan River. So we're talking about the pathetic and the weak and we're talking about some pretty beat up people here. And yet these other tribes, they gathered behind and they began to follow because there was a compelling vision to do something and to make a difference. And so they began to come together, and the success that Gideon, and we know the end of the story, he defeated the Midianites. But don't forget this, his success had to do not with him defeating the Midianites as one man, but the fact that his tribe and the other tribes gathered behind him. That's the success of this whole story. And I want you to think about this, because I'm circling around to this whole topic of synergy, that LifeLinks is a tribe. We are a tribe. We are a bunch of clans from all over the world. And your clan is your church from Uganda or from Norway or from Scotland or from wherever you're from. And we have come to this place and we are having our tribal gathering together, aren't we? That's who we are. Did you notice how many times this week Larry Osborne used the word tribe? He kept on saying, well, in my tribe and in your tribe. And you think, some of you are going, why is he using the word tribe? Well, why do we use the word network? It's just the word we use. And it's the word that he uses. But honestly, tribe is actually more biblical than network, right? And so really, when we're looking at LifeLinks, we need to understand that we are a tribe. We are clans. This is our gathering. Now, there was a book written. How many of you know who Seth Godin is? Seth Godin, he's one strange dude. He's like this internet culture guru. I don't even have to describe him. Throw that slide up. That's what he looks like. He wears glasses like that. And he wrote, these are a couple of his books, Become a Purple Cow and Lead Your Tribe to Greatness. This is the kind of thing he talks about and says. Purple Cow was another book. And then his latest book is called Tribes. And what he talks about is the fact that the world has always been tribal. And that, we don't think in terms of that, but if you look at the history, even relatively recent, the world has always been tribal. Our friends, brothers and sisters from Africa, they know all about tribal. Because all of Africa was tribal for most of its history. And in fact, if you find an African from, let's say, Ghana, my age, he'll probably have a tribal scar on his cheek identifying what tribe he's from. And the younger ones, they don't get them anymore. They don't do it as much. But the world has always been like that. North America has always been tribal, right? Our native people, they are Cree and Ojibwa and Navajo and Dakota. And these are their tribes, right? And Great Britain, sophisticated, seat of the Industrial Revolution, the Anglo-Saxons were always tribal. I mean, the Scots aren't going to let this thing go, are they? I mean, they got their clans, and they got their tartan that goes with their clan, right? And you got the Murphys, and you got the McIntoshes, and the McDonald's, and the Wendy's, and the Burger Kings, and the rest of them. And so what Seth Godin is saying, which is kind of interesting, he says the world is actually kind of departed from tribalism, but has actually come right back, and it's because of the internet. And he says what the internet is doing is the internet is joining people together in tribes again, and the internet is really the place, more than any other place, where the world is becoming tribal again. And you don't have to look very far. A bunch of you are probably part of some network out there online that is into something, whether that thing is scrapbooking or woodworking or speedboats or whatever. There's all of these tribes out there of people that gather together and they talk about their stuff, right? And the techie people, they all have their tribes. The gamers all have their tribes. And even what specific game you play has a tribe. And I'm not good. Well, let me just ask this question. How many of you are part of some forum or network that has something to do with something online? How many of you? Oh, really? I don't believe that for a moment. I'm like a member of like 12 of them. Some of them not even on purpose. Do you know that there is a tribe called the Power Washers Network? You know what these people do? Power washing. And I joined them. Well, let me explain why I joined them. I wanted to power wash my siding in my house. I had a question, so I thought, I bet there's guys that know about this stuff. I went online. There's the Power Washers Network. And so I wanted to ask a question. You got to join. You got to join the Power Washers Network. So I thought, well, I'll join. How bad could it be? I'll join the Power Washers Network. I asked my question. 10 people who were passionate about power washing wanted to, wade in and answer my question. You know what happened on my birthday? They sent me a birthday greeting from the Power Washing Network. I heard nothing from Dave Wells and LifeLinks. I'm just saying. So I could tell you all kinds of stories about how see, this is what Seth Godin says. You don't have to read the book, I'm giving you the best part. And he says basically that a tribe is this: any group of people gathered around a single idea following a leader. That makes a tribe. See, that's what Gideon had going. It was an idea to defeat the Midianites, gathered around that idea, and he was the leader, and he led them into battle, and they succeeded. And so we look at that picture, we see that is essentially what a tribe is. And Godin says that the world is being changed by these tribes. And I started scratching my head and started thinking about LifeLinks, and I think, that's what we are. We're a group of people gathered together around a central idea, following a leader to change the world. Let me tell you the story of Jeff Leakey tonight, and throw that picture up of him. This is Jeff Leakey. Some of you were with me in Florida when we met this dude. And you can see he's a relatively young guy. And in 1991, he came to be the pastor of Allison Park Church in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh, of course, was the steel city, right? And in the 1990s, that city was crashing and burning because the steel industry was just coming unglued, and half the city was unemployed and in discouragement and dismay. And he comes and starts pastoring this church, and people were looking for hope in the midst of this. And his church just exploded. And by 1995, after only 4 years, they were busting at the seams. They were multi-services. They didn't know what to do. And so they tried to expand. They tried to buy land. They tried to expand their footprint. The city wouldn't allow them to do it. He said, I have no choice. What I'm going to do is I'm going to plant a church. So he planted a church actually only a few blocks away. He had never heard of multi-site, so in 1995, I don't know if Larry Osborne had invented it yet. And so he didn't know about that, so he planted a church a few blocks away. What happened over the next 15 years was they planted 9 churches in Pittsburgh over the next 15 years. And every time he did it, he said they gave away their very, very best people. And they gave away their best people. And he said, outwardly, I was so enthusiastic. And I was saying, we are so excited to be sending off John and Susie and Bill and Fran. And he says, inward, I was dying. I was thinking, really? What am I doing giving these people away? And he said, I just kept on faking it. And he says, but every time I gave them away and planted this church, God brought me new leaders. And then he said, we started working together, and the 2 churches planted another one. And then the 3 churches planted another. And then within 15 years, we had planted 9 churches. And then in 2010, God put an idea in my heart, or a vision. Remember, there's no such thing as small partnerships, only small plans. And he said, God put a vision in my heart and said, you need to plant 100 churches. And he says, and I got up on Sunday morning and I told our congregation, what we're going to do over the next number of years is we're going to plant 100 churches. And he says, as soon as the word left my lips, he says, I wanted to grab them and pull them back. He said, unbelief struck me. He said, no, why did I say that? Let me get that 100 back. And he said, the whole rest of the message, he was sweating. He thought, what have I done? What have I said? We're at 9 and I just said 100? Why didn't I go with 20 or 15? He said at the end of the service, 5 young people came up to him and said, Pastor, if you're going to plant 100 churches, we're in, send us. If you'll train us, we'll go. He had 5 volunteers on the first day. So in the next 3.5 years, they planted 49 churches. They've already planted 49 churches. And so we saw him in May, and he says in October, this month, right now, this weekend, they're planting on one day, Sunday coming, 13 churches. And we're listening to this and we're all going, meh, we're not getting it. We're the 13 in one day, your brain doesn't get wrapped around it. But you see, there's no such thing as small potential, just small perspective. There's no such thing as small partnership. These are not big churches. These are small churches that have a vision to take their community, and they're taking their city because they have come together they're a tribe now. And they're a tribe that understands that they can defeat their enemy, Satan, in their city, and the discouragement and the brokenness and the poverty and the unemployment and everything else. And they're taking their city by storm. We heard from Peter the other day. Thank you for sharing, Peter. Thank you for discouraging the rest of us in North America when you told us that you're now at 428 churches. 2 years ago, he stood up and he said, we're at 310. We all went, oh. Now he comes this week. I think we should stop inviting him, frankly. But this week he comes and says, we're now at 428. Do the math. That many new churches in 2 years is over one church every single week. How many are you guys planting, by the way? Actually, I got good news for you. You know those churches that Peter is planting? You're planting those churches. Do you honestly think, no offense to Peter, he is a fantastic and great leader, but do you honestly think he's planting those churches by himself? You know why those churches are happening? Do you know why they have 428 churches in Uganda? Because he's part of a tribe called LifeLinks that is standing with him and behind him and resourcing them. That's why. Now, Peter, this is true, right? You're not doing this on your own. You know, you may be the least, right, in our tribe. Kidding. Kidding, obviously. But, I mean, it's all about the partnerships that have happened here. And, you know, Peter's just one of many stories. He told yesterday about the sustainability program. How do you resource 428 churches and 428 pastors? You don't. So the idea came up, well, what if we bought them a cow or bought them a motorcycle or bought them a chicken? And you know who it was? It was LifeLinks churches that got behind and bought these pastors those things. Look at that graph up here. Throw that one up. This is what happened. You folks came up with $67,577.30, and you bought 19 motorcycles and 76 cows and 87 bicycles and goats and land and piglets and all of these things. And these men have become self-sustaining because they have a cow or they have a goat or they have a motorcycle they're using as a taxi. And he actually, Peter, didn't raise any of this money. You guys did. It came out of LifeLinks. And look at these next pictures. You're going to love this. There's one of the pastors. It's always appropriate to dress right as a pastor, by the way. That's how we know he's the pastor. And the first one, go back to the cow. I love the. Look how excited he is about that cow. The cow to me looks super ugly. It has a black eye, but what do I know about cows? And he's got a rope around his leg so he doesn't lose it. This is my cow. And look at the next picture. These guys got goats. It has to do with where you are in Uganda, doesn't it? Whether you cows or goats. The next guy, what do the next guys got? Bicycles. Look at all those brand new bicycles. They're going to be able to go and shepherd their people better because they have a bicycle to get there. Instead of taking an hour, they're going to get there in 15 minutes and those sorts of things. And so, you know, here's just one example. Bethany Village. Tell me how many orphans are in Bethany Village? 102 orphans there. Out of how many of those would be AIDS orphanage? Oh, AIDS orphans. Guess.
In Uganda?
In Bethany.
I can't tell.
Well, I'll make something up. Half of them. Peter is a lot more thoughtful than me. I don't like to get bogged down in facts. I just like to keep moving. So half of these 102 are AIDS orphans. See, you just say it with emphasis and people buy it. And they had no water, they had no power, and there was this man in a LifeLinks church. Show this next picture. There was a man in a LifeLinks church. His name is Al Weeb, and he heard about this need, and he was going to be with one of Peter's teams there, and he heard that Bethany didn't have power and they didn't have water, and he was in a sales contest here in Canada, and God spoke to him and told him, he said, you're going to win this contest, and the prize was a $15,000 car, and he turned to his wife, and he says, I'm going to win that car. He actually had no chance of winning that, and even though he won the sales record in Manitoba, when he went, they still had to draw the name out of his hat. They drew the name out of a hat, and he won. And so they said, do you want the car or the cash? He says, I want the cash. And they said, you don't look very excited about this. He said, well, I'm not excited because I knew I was going to win. And they said, oh. And they said, well, what are you going to do why do you want the money? He says, I'm buying a generator. I'm buying a generator for an orphanage in Uganda. And the company got so excited about it that it's a longer story. I don't have time to tell you, but that $15,000 turned into $30,000. And they went and bought a generator and a water pumping system. There are no small partnerships, only small plans. And you see, what Peter's got going for him is that he thinks big. And he just goes and he says, well, the Lord's going to have to provide. And our challenge is that many of us, we're in these small places with our small thinking. You should be glad you're in the small place, but don't be glad about the small thinking, because the small thinking is what bogs us down. And when we begin to get a vision for what God could do, see, he wants to use you right where you are. And I know people look at me and they say, what would you know about small places? Look at your place. Our whole church could fit in your foyer. You know what? We've got that wrong. It has nothing to do with the size of this building. It has nothing to do with the size of your budget. It has to do with the size of your vision. Do you think we started here? We didn't start here. And I don't even believe in this big thing. I honestly think that small is the new big. That's what I'm into. And you say, what? You know what? I'm beginning to realize this whole big thing is an idol in North America church culture. And the bigger buildings, we have put mega church pastors on a pedestal, and we've worshiped these guys, and we have paid mental or passive assent to them squandering kingdom money on mansions and Rolls Royces and Lear jets, and it's perverse is what it is. It's sinful, I believe. Why are we even allowing that for a moment? I know it doesn't happen in LifeLinks, but the fact that it happens in the kingdom of God at all is disgusting. It's reprehensible. And so, for me, we've, in the 29 years we've been here at Church of the Rock, we've never, ever told our people how many folks are in the church. People don't know that. If you ask our people, how many come to church? Why would you even ask that question? We're not going to tell people how many people are in the church. You know why? Then they'll start counting numbers instead of individuals. Right? Let me ask you this question. How many of you have children? How many have children? When they were born, did you name them or number them? Just curious. My mother numbered hers, so it's not a good example. I'm number 3. But for the most part, you name them. You know that God never numbers us? Go read what it says in the Gospel of John, that the shepherd knows his sheep, and he calls them each by name. Why would we do any different? And you see, the moment we begin to count and do it numerically, then we have missed the heart of God. And we're so out to lunch. And you know what God does? As soon as you stop, and it's okay to have internal counts and track those things. I'm not saying not to do that. But when you get fixated on that, you're already dead in the water. And the reason God blesses you and the reason that God multiplies you is because you're not counting people and numbers. What you're doing is you're counting in your faithfulness to his call, whatever that is. And I remember when we had 40 people in our church, and I used to whine about it to God on a regular basis. And you know what the Lord spoke to me? I'll never forget it. He said, if you're ashamed of the 40 people I've entrusted you with now, why would I give you any more? And I thought, oh my goodness. And that was the day I stopped counting, because I thought that's not what we're called to. We're called to shepherd the sheep, not count them, right? And so we need a new perspective on this. We need to embrace the place in which we are, because that's the place in which God has called us. See, I think small is the new big. I think that's why and I don't have time to get into it. I'd love to talk about multi-site and love to talk more about church planting, because I think that's where it's at. Because what we're doing is, instead of doing this big thing, where what happens is we get better and better and better and better at what we do, and we produce this leadership gap, and everybody else is down here, and the worship leader is so good, and the preacher is so good, and the administrator is good, those people will never touch us. And then what happens is, what do we do when we're no good anymore, or we're retiring or whatever? We haven't filled that gap. We've created this big gap. You know how Larry Osborne kept on mentioning this Chris Brown guy on his staff, who's this great preacher? I remembered as he was talking where I'd seen him, and he spoke 2 years ago at the Willow Creek Summit, and this is what he said. He said, North America is at great risk of a bunch of major cities getting brand new, beautiful civic centers that used to be churches, because these senior pastors are holding on and calling them their own and owning these things and haven't raised up the next generation, and there's nobody to take them on. And I thought, oh my goodness, is that indicting? And so, you know what? It's not about, we've got to get this out of our head, that that's what our goal is. And I know, you say, well, who are you preaching to? Myself? Who do you think I'm preaching to? And I think what the real mission for here on in is for us to realize, you know what? Small is where it's at, going to where people live. And if God blesses it and multiplies it, great. But if he doesn't, you know what? It's measured by faithfulness, not numbers. And that's what matters. Let me end with this one quote from Mother Teresa. She said, "We can do few great things for God, only small things in great love." God bless you. Have a good night. Dave, it's all yours.